This video is about 5 tips on fasting. Fasting is a very interesting spiritual technique that can convey a lot of spiritual authority, especially over flesh. But my first tip for you in getting started is be safe. Please don't anyone do anything to hurt yourself and think that that would please God. It does not. One of the temptations that Jesus overcame was refusing to throw himself from the Temple Mount, asking God to save him. And likewise, we're not going to go and take foolish positions and then ask God to fix the results of our bad choices. We want to be wise from the beginning. And so that brings us to our second point, that you can actually still fast and get all your nutritional needs. You can try a Daniel's fast. In Daniel 1, Daniel and his companions eat a vegetarian diet of fruits and vegetables and drink lots of water and find that they are more healthy than the other young men. And so if you try this out yourself, you can look up recipes, you can prepare, and actually find that you can still fast or do a partial fast and still get all your nutritional requirements. And you'll still get some benefit from that and probably lose some weight as well. Now, if you go completely without food, you want to make sure you're drinking lots of water and avoiding sodas, especially diet sodas with the caffeine that can make you hungrier. But if you drink a lot of water, it helps fill you up, and a single day actually has some benefits of detoxing your body, although you may find you get a headache from some of the toxins being released. If you go into a second day, that headache should go away, but I'm not recommending people go into second days. I've done as many as 3, but it was back some time ago when I was using this as a technique to really hammer and drill down into the spirit realm before I understood about being able to ascend, and before I had a lot of other techniques that we learned later. But looking back over these years, I find that fasting is still a good technique and something that can give us spiritual authority. And so let's talk about why it is that fasting works. This is our third point, that fasting is introduced through the Hebrew Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And it's described as a way of afflicting the soul. That this word that's translated affliction can also mean humbling or lowering oneself. And so in this case, we know that soul and spirit are not the same. The book of Hebrews talks about dividing soul and spirit. It's traditionally thought that the soul is like your desire, your mind, your will, your emotions. And the spirit is the deeper part of you that can commune with God, your self-awareness. It's your consciousness, your conscience, and your wisdom. Now, as people have studied these things, they find it's actually a little more complicated than that, and there's different gateways between these parts of our being. But that's a little beyond the scope of what we're doing today. The point of fasting and why it works, the knowledge of why it works, is that it places your soul and your soulish desires beneath your spirit that can commune with God. And so that helps open up your perceptions to the spirit realm. And then our fourth point is that fasting conveys spiritual authority, especially over issues of flesh. Matthew 17 tells the story of Jesus throwing out an evil spirit that his disciples could not, and they didn't understand why. And Jesus explained to them that this kind comes out only by prayer and fasting. And we know that the disciples weren't fasting, but Jesus was. And so when an instance came up where he needed extra authority over some kind of evil spirit with an attachment to a boy, he had that authority over flesh because of his prayer life and fasting as a routine. And so this will bring us to our fifth point. I should actually go back and say, if you read this story from Matthew 17, you want to read it in the King James. There's a problem in some of the newer translations of the Bible that they delete the provision of fasting, and that's very unfortunate. We don't want anyone through their theology to take away spiritual techniques from us, especially one as powerful as fasting. And so our fifth point is, does fasting still work in the New Covenant? And the answer is yes. These principles were put in place. The Day of Atonement was meant to be a statute forever. Moses anticipated that a lot of his covenant rules would not last, but there would be a few that would, and Yom Kippur is one of those things. Also, Jesus talked about fasting. He said, when you fast, he explained some of it. And in the book of Acts, there's a couple of places where we know that the apostles were in fact fasting as a practice. And so it's still a tool in place. Now, one caveat about using this tool is that, as I've explained, there's some principles for why fasting works. But when we're using those tools, it's good. We have tools of how we can heighten our spiritual perception or have deliverance from issues of flesh. But when we're using our knowledge is not the same as relationship. And you always have to wonder if you're operating out of the tree of knowledge or the tree of life. And some of us practitioners have found out that you can still operate from future ages. I have a separate article about that. And if someone's operating from out of the age of Zion, they may not need some of these tools and techniques from the past. But as all of us are growing and working up and building ourselves up line by line in the Lord, fasting is something we can remember as a powerful spiritual technique with some real health benefits and something that can help us draw closer to the Lord. And with that in mind, please try it out and try it responsibly. Thank you.